Coffee culture in China is, it can be used not only to sort of describe my journey in China for 30 years, but especially with Starbucks, is a phenomenal case study for how it is, maybe not global companies, but certainly American companies can struggle to succeed long-term here in China. So to start, I get here 30 years ago. There was no coffee culture. I will show you, this is what coffee culture was when I first got here. It was the Nescafe 1+2, right? You know, you just poured, because you had hot water everywhere, but there was no coffee. The only time you could get coffee, and it was okay coffee, was if you went to a hotel. So you would go to a hotel and you get coffee. And for me, I didn't think much of it. I'm in China. It's a tea culture. And I also remember a lot of people talking about coffee, and there was a lot of dismissiveness. People said, coffee will never be popular in China because it's such a tea culture. Made sense to me. And then, and I remember it very vividly, in 1999, Starbucks entered. And the first place they entered was in Beijing. And they entered into, for those who are familiar, they opened in what is called the Gomao, which is this huge international, foreigners at the time were always there. There's a Shangri-La Hotel, massive complex. Of course they opened there. And then the following year, in 2000, they opened here in Shanghai over on Huaihailu. And the rest, as they say, is history. But here's the interesting thing about coffee culture, and more importantly, the interesting case analysis of trying to build long-term a successful business as a foreign company in China. So Starbucks, when they first entered, made the most brilliant move. They entered as a joint venture. Actually, they entered as 3 joint ventures. They had a joint venture in the north, a joint venture here in the area of the Yangtze River, and one down south in sort of near Hong Kong. And the idea was, Starbucks comes, we're going to bring our technology. How do you make coffee? How do you train the baristas, everything else? And our joint venture partners are going to go off and deal with all the logistics. How do you get the coffee? How do you get the machines? All of that. Distribution, dealing with the government, taxes. And it worked brilliantly. From 2000 to 2011, Starbucks just grew. And for those of you who were around, there wasn't a lot of coffee beyond Starbucks out there. A few coffee shops here and there. But by 2011, there was definitely no coffee culture in China. So Starbucks was very happy with themselves, and they did what I think was a normal move, is they went and they bought all their joint venture partners out. So they went from being 51-49, or I think that's what it was, to 100% owned by Starbucks of America, 2011. And again, smart move. Small problem though. Beginning in 2011, coffee culture began to start getting into where things are. And smart Chinese companies realized, hey, why would I go and buy 30 RMB for a cup of coffee at Starbucks? I can make it for 15. So you had starting, I wouldn't call them cheap competitors, but you had competitors that were offering a lower price point. And this is where Luckin, the old Luckin, right, before they went bankrupt and then came back, and then Manor after that, and you started to see this. But fascinating enough is it wasn't the chain stores that you began to see. It's all of the small individual owned coffee shops popping up, first in the big cities and then throughout the entire country. Because, in my opinion, because Starbucks was now 100% owned by the American corporate group, they weren't as close to the market to understand how things were changing. The Starbucks model is pretty simple. Get a location that's very, very convenient for everybody, have them all over the place, have it really big, have tons of places you can sit down and work on your computer. That worked, I would say, in China in the beginning. But that's not really what the Chinese ultimately wanted. And you saw, not just Starbucks expanding, but their properties became even more massive in size. You know, you've got the roaster, whatever it's called, the rotisserie over on Nanjing Lu. All the while this was happening, you know, and this is expensive, right? Big rent, big property, what have you. These small and up and coming chains and individually owned groups were making it about the actual experience of drinking coffee. You know, my favorite example, you know, in the last couple of years is when Luckin did the whole Luckin and Baijiu. Right? They came together with Guizhou Maotai to be able to come up with something unique. And you can go out now and there's fruit-infused coffee, what have you. But these are all very small shops that are focused primarily on the experience of the beverage of coffee. Starbucks missed it. They only really began to understand that there was a dynamic change in the last year, maybe two. And by the time management back in the United States recognized what had changed, kind of was too late. China is so dynamic when it comes to business. It's not just about being able to recognize that your business model is no longer matching with the Chinese marketplace. It's that the actual value that the Chinese consumer wants has changed. They don't want a big place to sit down. They want something that's unique that they can take a picture of, right? You know, and put it on Red Note or God knows where else. So where are we today? Well, Starbucks is now selling its China business. I don't know if they're selling all of it, but they're selling a big stake to a Chinese company. Most likely a Chinese company, we don't know quite yet. But it is amazing that between 2000 to 2010 and then 2010 till today, just how everything has changed. And again, it's a pretty interesting sort of storyline for what does it mean to build and grow a business as a foreign company here in China. Now, I'll just finish by saying one simple thing. I still love Starbucks, but don't listen to me because I just love a big, giant, black Americano. So I'm not into the culture, but it's fascinating to watch everybody else that is and all the new types of coffees that are out there. So I'm sure it'll continue to change.